So, hello everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of ClueCon Weekly this week. With ClueCon getting near, ClueCon is going to be in Chicago in October from 17th to the 20th, and there will be FreeSWITCH training led by myself on the 21st too. So come join us and learn something. Go to cluecon.com for more information. I thought it would be a great idea to have none else but the founder of SignalWire, the founder of FreeSWITCH, and well, everybody knows who Anthony Minessale is in the community. So thank you, Anthony, for joining us today.
Great, glad to be here. And if I remember right, I think you're doing a FreeSWITCH training in 2 weeks also, aren't you?
Oh, correct. Yeah. At IT Expo, we will be doing some FreeSWITCH training on the first day. So it's going to be on the 7th and the 18th of June. That's on the ClueCon page too. So, or reach out to myself and we'll arrange something. But yeah, we'll be at IT Expo too. That's important to know.
And we have a SignalWire Roadshow the weekend before that on Friday.
Oh, awesome! So there's a lot going on. Yeah, in Miami, the beach party. So
yeah, there's a lot going on in Florida.
Hit up the website and you'll learn everything about the beach party. Yeah, there is a lot happening. I think people are starting to meet up in person again, and it's a great moment to start working and start having fun with SignalWire, the APIs, and etc. So it was just great to have Anthony around. Well, I won't ask you for the usual introduction because honestly, people probably know who you are. But if you'd like to say a few words,
well, sometimes I wonder about that though, because I've been hearing that not everyone realizes that SignalWire is owned by me and the co-founders of FreeSWITCH in the first place. It was actually kind of surprising. I think sometimes there's a stigma that maybe SignalWire is some strange company that came and trying to take over. It's actually us who started it to try and take things to the next level. So yeah, it's interesting because everyone's so busy programming and stuff. No one's even noticed any of the evolution that's gone through the FreeSWITCH project, say, in the last many years. We've been around for 15 years. And I had people that I haven't talked to in almost that long. Like maybe they built the product or something in mid-2000s, and then they just used FreeSWITCH for 10 more years and never came back to look at what's going on and stuff. And they are all seem to be surprised by anything changing, but the world is changing around us and we have to adapt to it. So, interesting stuff has been going on with like just how do you host an open source project. When we started, there was no GitHub yet. We had to figure out how to do it ourselves. Like we went through 3 different
Subversion.
Yep.
Or was that not the first iteration?
I think so. We skipped CVS.
Oh,
we were
good.
still active developers for CVS, but I think Subversion, we went through that one and switching to Git and then GitHub. I mean, for years we hosted our own entire Git infrastructure. We had the Atlassian was still kind of an on-prem software back then, so we had a lot of stuff using that. We used Jira, and like because we're open source, they would give us like a copy of it to run locally, and like all that kind of stuff is migrating to the cloud these days. So it's like keeping up with the times, and being able to migrate some of that infrastructure. So lucky for us, we created SignalWire, which is a programmable infrastructure for telecom, and it also is a perfect place to kind of host some of these FreeSWITCH resources that really are running out of time for their existing setups. Like the Atlassian is end of life for any on-prem stuff, so we have to kind of migrate away from it. And we have, GitHub is a way better place to store the repos with all the branches and automatic pull requests and all that fun stuff. So, we've been evolving from, I think the first FreeSWITCH came out on a tarball.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of behind the scenes. So I don't know if everyone even pays attention to how much work maintaining code is. Like even not the fun part, not making really cool stuff out of it, but just keeping it from bit rotting is like a thankless thing. It's kind of these guys we have on the team that are constantly trying to make sure like there's a new version of every kind of. Imagine a cross-platform software that runs on every computer and every operating system. And then what happens every couple of years when all of those operating systems collectively upgrade everything. And when you're building from source, you have to go back and make packages, and it's all kinds of, trying to make everyone happy. Some people like to be purists and download everything and build it again every time. Other people wanted to be pre-compiled. So keeping up and managing all that stuff is,
I like packages.
You don't like them?
I like them. I like packages whenever I can. It's just easier to work with. But I'm an application developer, so I usually just use whatever's in the box.
It's hard not to, especially when you're in a hurry, because dependencies are really tough, and especially in something like FreeSWITCH, which touches like, I don't even know, like 20,
everything.
30 other packages, and they all have dependencies. It's like part of the Linux ecosystem when you really install everything. So if any one of those things has a bug in it, so do we, kind of thing. So, and sometimes we have to like preempt the package with like a newer one just for, to get it right, or we have to build a patch into one of the dependencies because it's like a politics to get it into the upstream one, and you have to go work on that, but it takes a while. But then everyone wants it to work now, so you have to put the patch in early, all that kind of fun stuff. So the packages make that easier because we just have like a meta package for all the depends that are already.
Yeah, it generally just works, to be fair.
Yeah,
Docker has made it a little bit more easier.
Like a fresh install of Debian and say, here, go build this. Like, it's not fun. It's not like a secret that only we know, because even I will struggle with that. Like, if you dumped me off in a Linux box and told me to build FreeSWITCH, I'd be like, oh, great. Now I got to get all the dependencies, and it takes hours. But you get it right. That's why you have really long build scripts in Docker and stuff eventually.
Yeah, Docker has made it a little bit easier. Like, you can compile from source, and you get the best of both worlds if you need it. But you don't actually have to go compile it yourself. Like, you could just have a Docker file.
There's a little disconnect there. Like, I would think that Docker would like packages more, but everyone I know that uses Docker builds everything at the time of building the Docker image, which kind of reminds me of Gentoo in the old days. Like, I always wonder, why don't you just install Debian or something on the Docker and then pull the packages in?
That's what I do.
Instead of building all of the world every time. That's like two different mentalities, I guess. But I don't do the DevOps anymore in the company, so it's just something I would do if I was in charge of it. I think I would make everything packages, so I wouldn't have to compile my images all the time.
Makes it much faster to bring up something, especially if you're in a hurry. It will take 10 minutes instead of an hour, because compiling takes time. It's just how it is. One thing before we go back to how SignalWire and FreeSWITCH are related, I'd like to ask you something which I only know part of. From a company standpoint, how did SignalWire get started? Like, what was the idea and the people that were involved? Just curious about what the history is at the first stage.
Yeah. Well, it was sort of a continuation of the effort. So we've been working on software-defined telecom even sooner than SignalWire existed in all the work we did in FreeSWITCH, right? So the quick version of FreeSWITCH is born out of necessity because we're trying to use it for stuff. We tried to use other tools and they didn't really work the way we wanted to, and we were kind of causing damage to the existing stuff by trying to change it so drastically. So we kind of went into our own sandbox and from scratch built out a paradigm that made sense for some of these use cases that we're doing, right? So once that happened, everyone kind of also got on, and lots of things were born, lots of enterprise companies. We have like the whole infrastructure of 5.9s and Vonage and the Zoom phone, and we have Amazon Connect, and we have just like all these countless, Dialpad, great early adopter, building all this infrastructure stuff with us as we're scaling up FreeSWITCH, right? And what really kind of started everything was that we were noticing that the barrier to entry was still really hard. So when we started FreeSWITCH, the barrier to entry was like literally being dropped in the jungle. Like, don't even have a machete to get through. You have to build your machete first too. And it was really tough to navigate those worlds. Like, everyone thought voice over IP was stupid, right? Like, oh, that's a dumb idea. Who's going to put all of their calls in the internet? Like, we already have phone lines.
Turns out everyone.
Yeah. So like, it was really tough. We had to like dig our way out of the swamp from that in the first place. We seemed like weirdos for caring about it so much. But then when we got to this level, we made FreeSWITCH and we started making all these companies. And there's been billions of dollars in just exits alone of like FreeSWITCH based companies that ended up selling out or growing through acquisition and that kind of thing. So we had this like pattern we're seeing, you know, like, and these large enterprises were able to succeed still, but it wasn't easy, right? Like even with FreeSWITCH that didn't exist before, suddenly appearing, it made your life slightly easier, but there's more to it because FreeSWITCH has a lot of say different ways to use it. It was very specific to like different use cases. So you'd have like 100 competing parameters. Like it's not that easy to learn. Like if you go in like one person's setting is a bug and the other one thinks it's right, so you have to make them both work. So you switch back and forth between the behavior. You have to configure your behaviors pretty much, like when you're talking to another device and all this kind of thing. And we didn't want to like force you into using any certain database. We didn't force you into a certain data model, and for like we made all these like wide things, so there were no like tight assumptions, which makes it a lot harder to support and stuff, right? But like nonetheless, you could build something really cool. But a lot of the people that were succeeding also had lots of cash because they would put like a lot of resources into say like trying to figure out how to harness the power of it, right? And being able to do that was limiting, like I'd say how many successful, you know, the ones that were successful are immensely successful, but others still struggle, and the barrier to entry never got any better. So the necessity we saw why we wanted to start SignalWire was like some of the other stuff that is like not necessary to do over and over and over again for the same reasons like I was talking about before. Like, well, who doesn't want to use GitHub for their software project now? It's like just obvious, right?
Yeah,
You
sure.
put it there, like it hosts it for you, lets you do everything. You don't want to think about that. And we used to have to do that. We would spend this 5-person team we had would spend a lot of time on this, just making sure our Git was working, you know, like that kind of thing. So you don't want to like do that when you have a bigger fish to fry. So some of these companies are in the same boat where anyone can go kind of download one copy of FreeSWITCH and run it somewhere and figure out how it works. And it's pretty fun. And you could probably, it scales really well. So you could have a nice little couple servers and put some stuff on it. But then it's running out of places, you know, you want to put them in the cloud and you want them to work and you want to put them in the cloud, but you want to move them somewhere else in the world instantly because there's something wrong on one side of the world, or like, oh, you have customers that are exactly in this certain region. You want to, you know, take advantage of all this virtual compute that's been coming out. You know, that didn't even exist when we started. We had like data centers with like 8 core servers stacked up, like trying to figure out how to code and work on multi-threading. And like now it's like 96 core virtual computers you can just buy from a vending machine. So in order to stick with that stuff and to be able to kind of reduce the intense burden of maintaining everything and focus more on like the actual fun part, we made SignalWire because we're imagining a world where you can kind of just talk to an API and quickly do all the stuff you want to be able to do. So we kept it so that there's kind of like 2 paths, depends on what you want, because we still can't resist like trying to cater to everyone. That's kind of one of our strengths and weaknesses. But we have this thing where if you like using FreeSWITCH, then we have a mod SignalWire, which is something you load into it. It'll actually connect your FreeSWITCH into our network automatically and negotiate a secure connection, which will bring you like a SIP pipe or something, so you can route calls from SignalWire into particular FreeSWITCHes that you might have somewhere. If you do have like a last mile where you want to put something like that, or if you don't want to do that and you just want to do the part where you're manipulating calls, we invented a protocol called Relay, which is sort of like the more secure version of VSL that you know, works with SignalWire clouds, and it uses like a elastic service so that you can just kind of write your script a similar way. The code's not exactly the same, but it's kind of more friendly towards like Node.js environments and that kind of stuff, so that you can do call control that just run a little tiny program, can run anywhere and connect to us, and then we will move it around and put the calls in the right spot for you and everything. So you don't really have to care about like CVEs and uptime and all that kind of stuff if you don't want to. But for me, like I'm always a purist. I have 7 copies of FreeSWITCH on my terminals right now. I update the code constantly on them and make sure it's all working still, even though my job is just to kind of run the company now. I can't resist, playing around on the server. So like I know there's people like that, and we make a world where you can do that. You go into GitHub, you can download it, build it, and do all the stuff yourself. But when it comes to SignalWire, we have bigger ambitions towards solving problems that are past just what FreeSWITCH can do, right? So it also is like all the scalability, tying things together in a way that are easy, including like hosting some of the things that are kind of just like dummy stubs in FreeSWITCH. There's no concept of users in FreeSWITCH, for instance, right? Like it just leaves off. You have to go and tie it into some complicated thing. And I built like 4 different things where we utilize that. And I see that one of the motivators was that was hard to keep doing that. And I wish it was faster and easier. So, we're adding new concepts right now. So users are already managed. You just use the REST API to add and remove users. Which will then suddenly have the ability to log in multiple protocols. You can make soft phone out of it. You can make them receive and have phone numbers and all those kinds of things. And that's hard enough, like being able to do that is what most developers want to focus on and not spend a ton of their time also figuring out how to scale and update.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So
I
that
have
was
a
kind of the
saying.
motivator for the whole idea.
I have a saying in that space, which is as an application developer and architect, that making one phone call with any open source, like FreeSWITCH takes a couple hours. Making 10 phone calls takes a day. Making 1,000,000 phone calls takes 5 years. Because being able to handle 1,000,000 phone calls is your problem. Like that's sometimes people in the development space get rightfully interested in FreeSWITCH and all the other open source packages. Then when they reach a certain scale, they realize it's super hard to run or very expensive. I've worked with people who are spending thousands of dollars on servers just to run few boxes on various applications. Sometimes it's hard to judge before, but we've made it easy to also switch with mod SignalWire and all the stuff. So people who are started in FreeSWITCH and think they need to scale quickly should likely use SignalWire as a bridge to better quality traffic. And there's a lot there. Plus, where do you buy your traffic? We have good suppliers. We have a lot of interesting features going on. When you're alone, you just have to go find some supplier and hope they're actually reputable. And it's not even hard to, unless you go to the top names, which are expensive, it's hard to figure out.
Yeah. And it's also like a good way to support the community because FreeSWITCH is basically fostered now by SignalWire and all the employees of SignalWire. There's an entire team who are constantly releasing and doing all the pull requests and making sure the code compiles, and we pay them with the money that we get from selling stuff at SignalWire. So like just if you already use telco minutes and you buy them from us, you're actually making sure FreeSWITCH sticks around. So it's a good way to support. If you can't think of another way, some people kind of offer their help with the wiki or whatever, coming into Slack and helping people answer questions. But just buying minutes from SignalWire is another way. It's not the most exciting way. It's not our best product. We make sure it works, but what we care about with phone service and SignalWire is to actually augment it with programmability and user management and a bunch of other stuff too. So it isn't just like we're not here to sell, say, like voice service.
Trunking, yeah, it works. Of course, it works very well, but
yeah, we want to add to it. We wanted to make like, how does trunking apply itself to this video room? What if I wanted to have a bunch of people call in right now through phone numbers, and we can make those things possible? Or what if I wanted to manage my entire company's users inside of a database where they all have their own kinds of different communication paths? You can call into video rooms, you can call into audio calls, you can call one-on-one to each other, you can call the PSTN. Like those are all things that FreeSWITCH doesn't solve by itself. You usually have to spend another couple of years building something around it. And then, like you said, if you don't build it right, you're going to build it 3 more times because you're not going to scale it properly. So we're trying to solve that in advance so that the programmers are working on integrations instead of kind of the same, like the prereq stuff should be put behind us, just like we no longer care about like putting all that work into making our infrastructure run. So that's the kind of thing we're working on, and that's not for everyone. Like I said, some people like live and breathe DevOps. Like I couldn't only imagine like some people wanting to go and build their own service, but they're not also probably building a giant monstrosity either. You know, like the guys at Vonage took years to get to where they were. They're as old as we are, so there was no FreeSWITCH to use the first version, so it was built on other stuff, and then they kind of found their way to us, and then they had to learn the hard way. How do I scale it? And I have to put it into different containers and scale it on the how do we make all the servers talk to each other and all this kind of stuff. So like there's always a thing, like you said, like the bigger your scale gets, the harder it gets. And we want to see if we can make something as ubiquitous as, say, how YouTube makes viewing videos easier, right? Like anyone can get engineering in MP4 files and say they made their own YouTube. There's lots of demos out there to build a little streaming thing, but it's not like you can't do it with the entire planet looking at it once in that kind of scale. So, you know, the hyperscaling thing is also one of the things we work towards, because we want to make it so that you never have to worry about that stuff again. And we still leave these wires hanging there so you can augment. You can put some on-prem servers in a certain spot if you wanted to, for things that make sense, like air gap stuff and whatever.
Yeah, the whole idea that even if you're a startup and you're looking at communications for various reasons, you're building a product on communications, or as it's happening more and more often in the people I work with, I mentor a couple startups, I've helped countless customers. You want to augment existing process with communications. Always think beyond the first call. Like getting a video room with plain FreeSWITCH in a web page isn't hard. It really takes, I mean, there's wiki. If you follow the wiki, it's going to work. In the time you read the instruction, it's going to be compiled and working. But once you start scaling, are you going to spend your money on figuring out things that have been figured out by others, or are you going to spend your money or building the actual features that your startup is building and your customers want to use? I think the answer is clear, and it should be you should use something that helps you develop and release faster, quicker, and not have to worry about, hey, is the FreeSWITCH server up? Because customer just called, they can't have a call. Oh, right. Yeah, it's actually
There's
died.
a lot of
It
things
actually
that way.
died.
Like it's the Othello model, right? It's really fast to learn, but it takes a lifetime to master.
Right.
I'll say, like, I started writing FreeSWITCH in 2004 or 2005, thinking like, okay, this will be easy, and it's been 16 years. Still adding stuff to it. So sometimes you have to be willing to put that much time into it, and if that's not the core competency of what you're doing, it could be an issue. So we try and find the line and make everyone happy. So like some developers are super elite and can like need less of our resources, but they still want to have it connect and scale, and other ones are new to the whole thing and they want just a quick win, but they have it automatically be elastic so that when they scale further, they don't have to learn like insane skills in order to do it. And yeah, there's just these kinds of tying everything together and being able to quickly compile it. And that's not like to say that there's no more work to be done, because even if you would use our service, like it gives you a whole step ahead of everything that you might not want to repeat boring stuff, you know, that everyone can do, but it also takes years to get right. But you still have to make your own stuff, that's what we're trying to do, is put all the work on your own business. So it's not like anything that is just kind of boring. Like email is a good example, right? Like, does anyone still make email? Maybe whoever's watching this, there's like 2 out of every 100 or something. But and when I first started doing engineering, everyone had their own email. You had to, so you had to go set up a server and put the emails, put SendMail or something on it, and then that's how old I am. I was using SendMail.
I don't even remember the names of those processes. We used to use, so there was a Postman kind of thing. There Dovecot for the actual mailbox. I don't even remember. There's a few. It's interesting. I wouldn't know where to start. You're right.
Yeah,
I
so
wouldn't
that
even
was the
know
kind of
what.
thing that you used to like have to do first. I'm starting a new online business, I have to go make my own email server and I have to manage all that, and like everyone's trying to spam you, and what now you would have to do, you learn all the lessons the hard way. Like, oh, my whole server is like inundated, someone's dictionary attacking me, and like pretty soon, like someone solved it and we take that one thing away. It's not like you don't still have a million other things to do, right? Whatever your business was, getting email was only one piece of it, right? So, but now you have to like maintain it. And then today you just go to one of 3 or 4 really large providers and get email instantly. But you still have to add your own company on top of that. So we think the same way about some of these communications paradigms. If we can make them more ubiquitous, like GitHub did for Git or email, that way you can, Stripe for credit card payment, right? Like I used to build a credit card payment thing from scratch, like every time I had a new project.
Wow.
It'd be like at the go, like the API barely did anything. You had to store all the data yourself on your own database. It was like super painful. You couldn't really get it somewhere. It wasn't like a point of presence, was easily attainable and stuff. Someone came around like Stripe and puts it all in an API. Like that doesn't solve your entire problem, but it certainly removes like a huge burden. That's part of the problem. So that's kind of how we look at SignalWire, and we like to make it so that just like Stripe, you could use Stripe from a web page. A person could be standing outside on their phone with a credit card reader and like it works. But the developer can go and write like an elaborate application because there's a bunch of APIs you can connect. Similar to Slack, right? Like Slack lets you log in.
Integrations and whatnot.
You just use Slack, right? You could have 100 employees and 3 of them are developers and the other ones are all just regular users, and they just chat on Slack and they learn how to work it. Those developers figure out how to write integrations, tie it into their business logic, have channels that talk to Salesforce and all that kind of stuff. And the integrations are where I really like to focus. So one of our big goals at SignalWire is to make it so that you can plug in telecom into those things. And then figure out how to make some interesting use cases out of it, which we already have some really cool customers now, like who are able to focus more on what their actual business is instead of the prereq that can consume like a lot of years of your existence.
Yeah, I think it's very, very important. Yeah, it's postfix. It was postfix of the email server. You're right. I think what we have now with the new video conferences is to start something very exciting because it's very extensible. You can build around it, or you can use it as is. We already have some people doing some very interesting and complicated stuff. I find as an application architect, and well, SignalWire's architect in a sense, what I find most interesting in my job is when people take what we built and use it to build something I didn't think of. Because I'm used to figure out various ways you can build something out of our APIs. So sometimes people surprise me, like, "Yeah, right, you can do that. That's awesome."
Yeah, that's like, and that's how computers work in general, right? Like, imagine when someone made a computer the first time, they didn't know what everyone was going to make with it either. It kind of just keeps going. The more stuff you build that kind of extends computers from bare metal up, like just keeps adding more innovation because then you've taken the burden away from them. Like in the old days, when a new computer came out, someone would sit down and write the operating system in assembly language from scratch. So like they make the computer and then they'd spend like 6 months making an operating system for it. Right, it's like it never changes. The same paradigm. Like we got bored with that. Like, why do we have to keep doing this? So someone invented C, which was considered a high-level language that allowed you to like compile the operating system on the new computer without having to code the entire thing. It would convert the, some general code into assembly for you, and like that made that light years. And then someone was like, well, we're at it. Let's make Unix so that we can type commands and like operate the computer without restarting it every time we want to run a new program. And then that got farther along. And then everyone started writing programs in the Unix environment. That's what got me into computers in the first place. That's why a lot of, FreeSWITCH is like the most friendly, even though it's cross-platform, like it's really at home in Unix. And extends it even further, right? And then we were trying to extend this simplicity. The power of the computer gets farther and farther away from the computer. Becomes cooler and easier. And now we have a generation of people that learn how to program that don't even have to dig as deep as C and assembly and all that stuff unless they really want to. And some people are more creative, so they can choose a different path where they code like using some of these really high level things, Node and whatnot, Python, stuff that's like extends further and further away from it, the original kind of really complicated machine instructions down on the computer. So it's like always about that. And I think we are trying to do the same thing with some of these, like negotiating and moving around video and everything is, like you said, easy to set up, but
Yeah, it
Running up
works
at
the first
scale and
time.
solving the usability problems and things that come with it. Especially we're kind of also trying to jam it into the browser. You know, there's a lot of different WebRTC hype going around, but like sometimes it's still like you said that before, like you can go find something online and make a little video chat thing in 2 seconds with like the bare WebRTC and everything. But we're trying to work on some more stuff like automatic SDKs that actually move around to a different server when one of them doesn't work and finds one that does work, that deals with all the usability issues of someone's like mic and camera and all that stuff and automatically adjusts for it. While the call is going, there's a bunch of complexity for making sure that the video stream is operating right. And I think that's just like, to us, like another medium for the same kind of paradigm. So the spirit of FreeSWITCH is extended into SignalWire, and some of its video products are in the same way trying to simplify and allow you to write code that plugs in and extends it rather than make you implement the whole thing again, which I think there are a lot of companies trying to make video SDKs where they build it at so low level that you're still doing work. Like, have you ever been tasked to abstract something and you found that all you did was rename all the functions? Like, if you're not careful, like you just make something that's just as hard as not using it. Like you make an abstraction layer and you're like, here, use my code instead. It makes it easier, but it's really equally complex as whatever you wrap the code around. You're just renaming everything and hiding the real one. So you can do that sometimes when you're not careful. So you have to really like solve something at each step. So we do that in FreeSWITCH because we have like C APIs, and you can. I thought it was like quick and amazing to write a new module in C really quick to do different stuff, right? But then that starts to get burdensome after a few years. Like, well, every time I want to do something, I have to write like 500 lines of C. So it started out being really cool that you could even do it, and then you get bored with it, and you're like, well, I only want to embed scripting languages so I can write like 3 lines of scripting code instead and do the same stuff. And then you're like, I want to have it over a socket so I don't have to crash FreeSWITCH. And it's kind of evolved further and further towards just making it easier to harness the same power instead of going and repeating ourselves, because we're trying to make progress as society, so we don't want to repeat. Everyone just keeps starting from the same starting line and trying to catch up to everyone, and it takes forever. So we should be building up and starting from the newest line of progress and push on top of that. So that's really important to us.
Yeah, that's again from let's say from almost a business standpoint, what I see here is that people should be working on the business logic that brings value to their company and not figuring out why their phone calls are not working. That's
that happens to be their co-founder, right? If your co-founder is like the most boss DevOps person ever, then maybe you should do it that way, because you might be able to squeeze some margin out of it because you can manage your DevOps really well. But if that's not your thing, then you might not want to do that. Like, I don't even know if I want to do that sometimes, because I can do some pretty, we have some great DevOps people on our team. If I went and started a new thing from scratch right now, I might be tempted to go and build a bunch of it. In my day, like, you had to build the whole thing. You had to build like, oh, I want a bin system. What's that? There's no such thing. I have to code it from scratch and some random thing. There's like so many head starts for that now and packages, and it's all depends on what you're willing to do. But I found that in our business, we have to focus on our business over stuff that's already been solved 100 times over. That's why we use GitHub, and why we use Salesforce. It's like a tool that you have to pay money for, but it's like better than writing a system from scratch. There's just certain things like I wouldn't want to do that. I could do it, right? Like, if you gave me a team and locked me in a room, I could probably invent Salesforce clone that worked perfectly enough for whatever use case I had. But by the time I did it, everyone else would have been ahead of us at our core competency, and that's kind of, we already have a purpose. So why we go and reinvent Salesforce when our real goal is to make a communication platform? So we think that way about stuff too. It's like, so that's kind of our culture, is to like focus on things that we can do well.
Yeah, there's well, I mean, this is SignalWire has been around for a while. We started doing some very interesting stuff a few years ago. We're doing even more now, and it's all thanks to Anthony and all the other co-founders, and well, Sean and Evan too, which we'll have on the program soon too. And thank you for joining us today, Anthony.
It's great to be here.
Few plugs for the next few weeks. So yeah, we'll be at IT Expo. Anthony will be too, and we'll be at the FreeSWITCH booth, and there will be FreeSWITCH training. So let us know if you'd like to join us. And more importantly, ClueCon is in October, coming back to Chicago from 17th to the 20th of October. And in the video description, there is a coupon for $100 off the ticket. So just grab yours and come join us. It's going to be great. We'll have a keynote by Anthony, and I'll be doing some training for sure, both on FreeSWITCH and SignalWire, and there'll be the usual smattering of interesting talks, training, meeting people. It's finally back. I mean, last year's hybrid version was great, but I feel like I'm ready to go back to crowded conferences and having a lot of fun with all the people from the industry, people I know, and meeting new people too.
Yeah, a lot of great stuff was born from that. The first ClueCon is why we have FreeSWITCH now.
Oh,
We
wow,
weren't trying
really?
to start
I
FreeSWITCH,
didn't
we
know
were
that.
just trying to start ClueCon, and then it turned into FreeSWITCH.
Really? So
Yeah.
ClueCon started before FreeSWITCH?
Yeah, it has a year head start on it. So the first ClueCon was centric around Asterisk still, because that was the only choice, and we put a lot of time and effort into that project as well, which we still I think there's still code from us in there, like if you look close enough. But back then that was like the only option, and it had its own kind of opinions on how to do things, and it was already pretty well matured, and we started out building kind of stuff out of it and call it breaking it a lot. Like, say we probably broke it a lot because we would like force it into paradigms that it wasn't really meant for. It had a very specific perfect. It was like a PBX, and it had these really cool hardware cards in it, and you can make a phone system out of it. And then we would try and do stuff like make ISP out of it. When it use Asterisk to become a SIP provider, and then like some other have tried that too, and that was where it started to go a little wonky, and that's what's led us down the road of making a soft switch instead of a PBX. But if you do the soft switch right, you can emulate a PBX. So that ended up happening too. A lot of companies now make PBXs out of FreeSWITCH, which is kind of ironic and funny, but it's really kind of designed to be a platform that moves traffic from one place to another, but it doesn't stop you from using it in that kind of paradigm too. And I think that as we move into this UCAS era, you'll see that some of those functions that are there in FreeSWITCH will get exposed kind of in programmatic ways to kind of fit this kind of new UCAS era. UCAS is my least favorite word because unified communications has been this like holy grail the entire length of my career, going back in the 90s. Like you can always just say unified communications and it can change meaning, and it's just like it's something that's elusive but almost there. And yeah, so now we're calling it UCAS. We didn't even figure out how to do unified communications at all, so I don't know how we can do it as a service now, but that's buzzwords for you.
Nice. Well, yeah, there's a lot to do still, and we're building it. Part of it, we're trying to build the future of communications together. And again, Anthony, thank you for joining us today. It was an honor and a pleasure having you in the program. And well, for everybody else, I hope I see you in a couple of weeks at IT Expo. I hope I meet you at ClueCon in October. And
don't forget the SignalWire Roadshow on Friday before IT Expo.
Yeah, the beach party. Yeah, fortunately I won't be flying there because I didn't find a plane, but I'll land the day after, so I'll hear all the great stories from the other people who are there. And
put up a cardboard cutout out of you.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, at least have me in the photos, please.
And pose with it and look like you're in the pictures.
Yeah, perfect. So I can say it was the party. And for the rest of people, I'll see you next episode next week. Goodbye.